I'm Becca Ploessl. Do you know what the First Amendment is? Well, it's the freedom of religion, assembly, press, petition, and speech. If you didn't know that, you most likely didn't graduate from high school. In government class or history classes, the teachers drilled the First Amendment into our brains. Why? Because these freedoms are what makes the United States unique and different from other countries. The main one I'm going to talk about is the freedom of speech. Today in America, there has been a big problem with hate speech, and some even believe it should be banned. Hate speech is speech that attacks, threatens, or insults a person or group on the basis of national origin, ethnicity, color, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. These signs here are examples of hate speech at protests or things like that. God hates fags, thank God for September 11th, Islam is evil. These sayings can hurt people that are of these ethnicities. And in our book, Florida explains that the U.S. is a melting pot because of all the cultures and people that live in the United States. And this, God hates fags, can go against the LGBT culture, and this is the Muslim ethnicity and culture. And this happens all the time lately, and you see it in the news regularly. But when there are cases dealing with hate speech, it tends to be dismissed because of the First Amendment regarding people's freedom of speech. I agree that hate speech should not be banned in the Constitution because the First Amendment gives us freedom of speech. It would be going from hate speech to hate violence, and if it was banned, it would be nearly impossible to monitor. On December 15, 1791, the Bill of Rights was adopted, and in that was the First Amendment. One of the 5 main freedoms we have as Americans is the freedom of speech. The First Amendment guarantees that deeply offensive and hurtful things can be said without fear of criminal punishment. People shouting homophobic statements to people in a gay pride march would be an example of hate speech. The people yelling those statements can do this because of our freedom of speech. It would be an infringement on our basic rights that are laid out in the Constitution if they were taken to court over it. In many countries, they put people in jail if they say something against a politician. This defeats the purpose of having free speech if humans cannot think and say as they choose. Samuel Walker, the author of Hate Speech, The History of an American Controversy, explained that the First Amendment is one of the glories of American history. It is the right to express oneself and to participate in the democratic process. Along with that, free speech exists specifically to allow and protect opinions that offend and repulse other people. Hate speech is similar to criticism. According to Floyd, criticism is the act of passing judgment on someone or something. This would be like saying you dislike your friend's outfit or calling someone overweight. Then there is destructive criticism, which can put someone down or destroy their self-confidence. This happens when people receive hate speech too. It affects who they are, but we have the right to say what we want to say, even if it is not morally right to do. Dave Catter expressed his feelings on the common phrase, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," by saying children will develop thick skin to insult and taunt, which is a good quality to bear. After all, people came to the United States years and years ago to have these freedoms. It was the main selling point for people all over to want to come and live in a free country. Therefore, if we were to ban hate speech, we would be going against our main selling point in our freedom of speech in the First Amendment. Freedom of speech is important to the U.S., and if it were to be restricted, there would most likely be worse outcomes than there are now. If people can't say how they feel, they will turn to violence. By preventing hate speech, people who are inclined to hatred will go straight to violence. Kevin Malik explained an instance in history where this happened. Take Britain. In 1965, Britain prohibited incitement to racial hatred as part of its Race Relations Act. The following decade was probably the most racist decade in British history. It was the decade of Paki bashing, when racist thugs would seek out Asians to beat up. It was a decade of firebombings, stabbings, and murders. And this is an example of what the people would look like that did those murders. This shows how prohibiting it can lead to much, much worse. Hate speech is better to have than violence erupting all over the U.S. This can be peacefully addressed, and if it were to be banned, it would proceed to the next dangerous and harmful stage. Therefore, banning hate speech would not get rid of the underlying problem and simply make matters worse. Banning hate speech can lead to worse outcomes, but tracking and monitoring hate speech would be even harder to do. In a recent article, Swapa Krisha explains how hard it is for Facebook to deal with hate speech. She states that hate speech is hard to regulate due to there being over 2 billion people on Facebook, and watching what they post would be incredibly difficult and nearly impossible. You can report content you see on Facebook through you can do it by doing photos, videos, or comments that you don't approve of. You can report it, and then Facebook can either delete it or contact you about it. And we are on Facebook daily, so that helps you communicate with other people, and that is why it's becoming a problem on Facebook, because people are on Facebook all the time. And reporting is understandable, but banning is too far. Along with that, if hate speech were to be banned, there would end up being millions of cases across the United States. There are over 320 million people living in the U.S., and if 1% were caught expressing hate speech towards someone or group, there would be 3.2 million court cases across America. That is an outrageous amount of court cases over what someone said. There are more serious and worse problems going on that have to be in court, rather than it being over hate speech. Tony Massaro, the author of The Hate Speech Dilemma, said that many people argue that there is no workable solution to hate speech. Any regulation would be too chilling of good speech or so narrow and likely unenforceable. Overall, the banning of hate speech would go against the First Amendment. It would cause more serious negative outcomes, and it would be extremely hard to monitor through the U.S. With social media and phones and anything that people can communicate through, it makes it hard for them to monitor all the speech that goes on. Since we are talking all day, every day, it'd be hard to monitor everyone talking. People are communicating through their thoughts to others, whether it is considered morally right or not. But that is what the United States is about. They are about having the ability to express yourself and preach or say whatever you feel, whenever you want. Free speech is a cherished part of the American tradition, and restricting it would not help anything. America is a free country, and banning hate speech would take away our freedom of speech that we have had for centuries.